This video has been sponsored by Skillshare. Stop! You violated the law. Pay the court a fine or serve your sentence. Or maybe neither. Because did guards like this exist in the past? Did medieval societies have police? Did the scoundrels of history fear the long arm of the law? Well, to answer these many questions, it's time we made an inquiry. A feature inquiry. I may need to work on that intro. Hello and welcome to Feature Enquiry, a new show all about whatever I decide it happens to be about. This time it happens to be about seeking the answer to the question, are guards historical? Now of course that's a big question, so allow me to narrow it down a tad. In a plethora of fantasy and historical games, books and movies, especially those with a medieval-esque settings, there exists the presence of guards. Typically well-armored men under the employ of a lord, serving and protecting the people of their city. Now, is that historically accurate? No. Okay, well, technically, from a certain point of view, under certain conditions and specific places and circumstances according to various rabbinic opinions, there could have seemingly been something close to what we'd call a guard. I mean, of course, across the entirety of human history, there has definitely been guards, but in this video I'm focusing specifically on 13th to 14th century Western Europe, as that's what typically influences much of the historical and fantasy media we consume. If that disappoints you, well, tough tits. But now, without further ado, sorry to those who wanted some more ado, let's get into the meat of this. If you were to research this question yourself, one of the first historical equivalents to guards you might find are watchmen. Watchmen would be a common sight in many cities, towns or villages. Their job was to watch the streets, the nights, and most importantly, for fires. Fire watching was actually their primary job. Crime prevention was more secondary. But before you begin to envision a man in armor jumping up and down screaming, "Fire!" well, watchmen looked nothing like that. More often than not, watchmen had nothing close to a uniform. They'd be wearing their normal, everyday clothes because why not? People knew they were the watchmen because people knew everybody in town. Watchmen wouldn't usually be some big, intimidating young man either, but rather someone's old dad. The job of a watchman was one of the less physically demanding jobs to do, and so it was often left to the retired and unfit. And in regards to their actual equipment, well, that was often not much more than a club, which in of itself isn't much more than a stick. You'd think that they'd be getting supplied better gear than that, but, well, that's just the thing, their gear wasn't supplied. Watchmen were volunteers, the only thing they were rewarded with was a smug sense of superiority. Now when it came to doing their job, watchmen would deliver justice with fines, roughhousing and humiliation, but mostly fines. Note I didn't say prison, as prison back then wasn't for the common man. Cells would only be a holding place for the soon-to-be executed or for nobles or other high-profile captives. And another big difference between watchmen and police is that as long as a watchman didn't witness something, it's not his problem. Crimes like murder and theft were seen as a personal matter. It'd be the victim's job to take an alleged to trial, not a watchman's. And at the end of the day, the job mostly boiled down to making sure no one was causing a fuss. But a fuss can get out of hand. What if the fuss was a hostile army or a mob of bandits? Well, a watchman's not doing anything about that. For something like that, you'd need a garrison. Now, surely there's historical examples of those. Why, yes. But picture that yes with an asterisk. A garrison, or a household, or a retinue, or any name you want to use, was a group of people that personally served a local lord, not a city or town. Now, something like a castle typically houses a lot of people, one of which is the lord, who is surely worth guarding. And so a castle could host a garrison of hundreds of men, armed and armoured, out of their own pockets of course, serving the lord with the promise of pay. However, this was exceedingly rare and was limited to wartime. Generally, castles were at peace, but even in peacetime they had quite a few men in them. Their jobs were not to guard, but they certainly could. The dozen or so nobles and men at high standing in residence could be summoned as men-at-arms and do away with anyone who threatened the castle. Now maybe the idea of a dozen men protecting a castle sounds silly to you, but you can protect a castle with a dozen men. Castles are built to be easily defended, that's the whole point of them. The only time a dozen men couldn't guard a castle is if it were being sieged by an army, which is when the lord should have done what I said earlier. Send the marshal to go get the word out that the lord is hiring. After that, a proper garrison should be rallied in no time. They would do their job as long as they were paid, and the moment they weren't needed, they wouldn't be there. Now, of course, there's still many more forms of guards I haven't mentioned, like caravan escorts and merchant guards, but they more fall in the realm of private security. And of course, as I prefaced at the start of the video, I only barely touched on a very slim part of history in a very small part of the world. If you were hoping to get some kind of encyclopedic knowledge from this, well, you're going to need an encyclopedia. But now, as we come to the end of the video, I think it's interesting to remark how just a small touch on just one aspect of medieval society speaks volumes about it as a whole. The world lacked standardization. Old practices, kingdom to kingdom, city to city, village to village, varied and were mostly independent of one another. Uniformed police that served and were supplied by the taxpayer were just about impossible in this era. Today we take concepts like police, government and nationhood for granted. It's just how things are, we say. But it's not how things were. Speaking of taking things for granted, research. As I said before, the question I looked to answer today was pretty big, and even as I narrowed it down more and more, I still had to do my reading, track down sources, and jot down my notes. Study is study and procrastination is easy, but just like all of you have to eventually hand in your work, so do I. So that's when I started looking into developing better studying skills, and what better place to look than Skillshare. Skillshare continues to be a great tool for learning just about anything. With its premium membership, you can get access to tons of courses to help you study, write, present, and a whole lot more. If you're interested in getting on the site and viewing those courses, you can do just that by using this special offer. Follow the promo link on screen or in the description and get your first 2 months of premium membership for free. I have no idea how long that deal lasts, so why not just sign up and start learning today. Thanks for watching the video, I suppose, and thank you to the patrons and, using the script again, Harry Berkeley, Thomas Curley, Anal Scrubs, Ermi Rez, and Skylar Hagler. Next video is going to be another animated one. Don't really know what yet, but I reckon you're starting to get the idea of alternating video formats. Yeah. Alright, well, catch you later then.